By far the most powerful and flamboyant promoter in the history of boxing. He worked with them all, Roberto Duran, Ali, Tyson, Sugar Ray Leonard, made a lot of friends, made some enemies. But tonight, he's still a boxing giant, Don King. Don, welcome to the show.
Roger, it's just a delight for me to be here.
Now, Don, I got to go right to the point, and we'll get this over with. What's the latest thing? They're going after you on something. You've been indicted?
Yes, I have. You know, I've been indicted. First, let me say, Roger, that I'm completely innocent of all allegations that have been leveled against me. But I believe in our system of justice here in America. I believe in American people, and I will be cleared.
Don, if you're not cleared and you go to prison, will you still believe in the system?
I will believe in the system. Sometimes some of the people that works the system may be manipulated and maneuvered and not know what exactly is going on. But the system itself, if it's worked at and adhered to, then you can't find a better system nowhere in the world.
Don, I've never heard anybody ask you this. Tell me about your parents.
My parents were, you know, poor people, but my father, he got killed in 1941, December the 7th, the same day the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. A steel mill later exploded, and he was consumed with the hot
molten lava. You were in Cleveland at that?
In Cleveland, yes. She was working Jones and Laughlin. And my mother, being a very frugal woman, she took what we call tragedy money, which is double indemnity when you are accidental death, and she put us into a mixed neighborhood called Mount Pleasant in Cleveland.
I know the area.
And she worked with us, and you know, she was a great lady. She instilled faith in me, and she told us that we could be anything we want to be, and don't fall prey to divisiveness, and work with people, and you can make it work, but keep your faith in God. And so through that faith in God, He's carried me this far, and He's never failed me yet. So I'm really God's child, Roger.
Are you more or less religious than you were years ago?
No, I'm more now because I'm more mature and I understand a lot more than I did before, but I've been very religious all my life because there's no way that I could do the phenomenal things that I do and achieve the accomplishment that I achieve without having God on my side and God being with me. And I put Him right in front of me and let Him be my buckler and my sword.
But you didn't listen to your mom. You got into trouble when you were a kid, right? Yes,
you get into trouble, you know what I mean? Well, sometimes you be not listening, but how a circumstance and events plays a major part in one's life, too.
You went to prison for killing a guy.
Yes.
How did you feel when you killed a guy?
I have suffered deep contrition for being instrumental in the fatality of a human life. However, the guy attacked me. I did not attack him. He's the one who started this here. Started out as aggravated assault, but I was in the numbers business. So when they found out that I was the numbers guy, then the charge escalated from aggravated assault to second-degree murder. And then the judge reduced it back down to manslaughter, which it really could have to be. And at that time, the riots in Cleveland was going on, and they figured if they could remove me, they could remove the ills that was beleaguering my city of Cleveland. And so this is how that happened, you know what I mean? But nevertheless...
What year was that, Don?
This is in,
You were a kid at the
time. It's 40 years. It's
40 years
a long
ago?
time ago.
If I attacked you today, would you kill me? Could you kill me?
No, but you know, it wasn't intending for killing. It was a fist fight. It was not a fight where you were going to kill someone. You had to fix it. And an exchange of blows, the kicking and the hitting, you know, he expired, you know, about 7, 8, 10 days later and met an untimely death. It was what I call frustrations of the ghetto expressing themselves. There's 10,000 fights a day in the ghetto, and I had to be one that would be instrumental in that. And the only way
pick a guy who'd die on you.
Yes, the only way you can expiate for sins is to try to do for others, you know, and this is what I've been trying to do.
They got this Colin Ferguson for killing those people out on Long Island, and they're using as a defense black rage. What is black rage, and do you think that's a legitimate defense?
I don't know. And it really is the defense is a person, unless the person is trying to do you bodily harm, you know, and in our Constitution, it gives you the right to protect yourself. The right to bear arms was the Second Amendment, which is something that's how important it was. After the First Amendment, freedom of speech and the right to assemble and to protest and demonstrate, and the freedom of the press, the Second Amendment was the right to bear arms. But in order to have secure and protect those rights, and liberties that have been given to us. So, you know, I don't know what the circumstances and events is.
Colin Ferguson killed 6 people and wounded 15 or something like that. Should he get the chair?
I don't know. I don't know what the circumstances of this kid, but I know that's a very tragedy for a person to kill 6 people, and I don't know what the provocation was. You know,
if black rage is legitimate, why couldn't whites who were in the Ku Klux Klan claim white rage for hanging and lynching? I mean, in other words, isn't it a dangerous thing to say one group of people can have rage and therefore kill some other people?
You're absolutely right, Roger, but you must understand that the Ku Klux Klan killed blacks indiscriminately without compunction or remorse and never had to go to trial even to be even dealing with it.
I have
Is
to
that
think
right
that
either way?
human beings running around in the woods with sheets on are nuts.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean that's my view of them. And I think they should have gotten capital punishment if they killed anybody. I'm just saying that our society is maybe grown into a situation where nobody's responsible. How much more responsible can you be if you kill 6 people and wound 15? I mean, that's pretty responsible.
Yeah, you are. You have to be responsible for your actions. I think that black or white, that the right should prevail, and that's what the Constitution gives us in doing this. However, you know, attitudes and minds of people that do extreme things and that people that look the other way. Today you look the other day is you, tomorrow it's the next guy, or maybe so you got to understand this should be done right. And I agree with you. Everyone should be responsible for their actions, and they have to give an account of their actions, because that's what an orderly society is comprised of. You want to take it out of chaotic situations and put it into an orderly situation.
Are you a rich guy now today? I mean, you had promoted a lot of these fights. You made a few bucks, right?
I made a few bucks, but my richness comes from people. You know, knowing people and being able to deal with people, that's where your real richness comes from, to be able to have a free exchange of ideas and to be able to use people and people use you, but not misuse people. And I think this is what my greatest asset is my people.
But the accusations against everybody in this business, promoters, P.T. Barnum, everybody, is that guys who do this for a living tend to rip off the people. In the old days of boxing, a lot of guys got, I don't know whether Joe Louis did, but everybody talked about Joe Louis. Did he get ripped off?
Yes, they say he did.
Okay. Is that still going on today in boxing?
I would imagine that it is. I would imagine that some people are getting ripped off. And so that's when I came into boxing, and that's why I revolutionized the pay schedule in boxing. I pay more money than anyone ever paid in the history of the business. So, you know, and I think one of the most salient things that happened is when they were after one of the fighters, Larry Holmes, and they said that he's taking something from you. He said, well, let him take it. He said, well, what he's leaving me is more than 100% of what I would get from anyone else. So, I mean, but it's ironic that they would say that I would try to rob a fighter when I set the tone of what I have to pay the fighter, and I raised the marketplace, in the marketplace, I raised the price to a height that has never been before, and I'm instrumental. Even if I'm not giving the fighter the money, if they use me as an alternative, the other promoters will have to give them more money. They may not even have talking to me, Roger, and they say, well, I'm a king is talking to me, and I'm going to see him. Right away, the price goes up. So one way or the other, I'm instrumental. Even if they're with me, I'm going to give them more money. And if they're not with me and they're smart and they use my name, that they're going to contact me or they've been talking to me, they get paid more money.
Don, what's the best investment you ever made?
The best investment I ever made is my faith in God, and from that, my faith in the people that are God-like. Okay,
but if you had to put bucks somewhere, where would you put it?
Well, I was putting it in the stock market, which is going to probably lead to your next question, which is the worst. It wasn't a stock market crash. Me and my group lost about $50 million in '87 on that, whatever, the October 9th or what date it was. I don't know.
Yeah, October 29th.
Yeah, somewhere in there, it wrecked us about a few years back.
$50 million bucks.
Yes, I didn't have all of that. Maybe about 15 of those.
What'd you do that night?
Yeah, I smile and laugh. You know, it's better than sitting on the stoop, Roger. Just think, in America, I had an opportunity to make that kind of money. You understand? Now, had I not been in America, I would have never had a chance to even amass a fortune of that size. So, therefore, I said, we did it once, we can do it again. This is a great nation.
You got a lot of guts. I'd have gotten blind drunk and still been drunk from '87 to today if I lost $50 million.
Well, you have to understand something. Most time in life, no one would ever say that we could even acquire or even attempt to make that kind of money.
Can blacks in America today make it? Do they have an even shot?
No, they don't have an even shot, but they can make it because I have. You know what I mean? And America is the greatest country in the world, but you must understand that the great fundamental principle of America, that we hold these truths self-evident, that all men are created equal, endowed by the Creator with certain inalienable rights, among these which are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You must make that come true. It ain't quite true yet. When they say one land, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all, you must understand that ain't quite true yet, but we have to work and adhere to that because it's in the contract.
All right, you've been around a long time. 40 years ago, you were a kid, you got in a little trouble. Is it better today for African Americans than it was?
I think it's worse. I think it's worse. I don't think it's better. I think that
more are going to college, more are entering the middle class, more are rich.
Yes, well, you know, you're getting
vocal, more on TV.
You're getting a lot of exposure, which is another phase, as like what Frantz Fanon was saying, and Richard other contradiction and expansion. But blacks must extirpate the feeling of less objectionable, more acceptable, and they must be able to work with this system and understand this country that was born and bred in revolution, and understanding that when the Constitution was signed on March the 4th, 1789, that they had a 3/5 compromise. That 3/5 compromise said that blacks are 3/5 human beings. In order to get the House of Congress, they had to give 100 blacks to make 60 whole human beings.
Wait, hold it right there. We're going to come back on the African American experience and Don King right after these messages.
Roberto Duran, manos de piedra, Anderson, el campeón del mundo, te quiero mucho, reparto.
We're back with one of the biggest players in the history of boxing, Don King. Tell me about that clip about Roberto Duran. He's something, huh?
Yes, he is. He's manos de piedra, hands of stone. He was a young kid that came to New York, and he beat a guy from Ireland for the World's Championship, and he was with me for about 12 or 13 years. He's a tremendous fighter. He's one of the best lightweights in the history of the sport of boxing, and he just went on up and ballooned up to welterweight and the middleweight.
Word was he got a little drugs in his system and backed down. Is that what happened to him? He got off the track a little bit?
I don't know if it was drugs, but he was drinking heavily at one while, but he's a tremendous gladiator. What a fighter. I'm telling you, if you had got 1,000 newsmen, and that's who was most likely to do what he did with Sugar Ray Leonard, nobody would have said anything. He would have got 1,000 of 0. It wouldn't have been Roberto Duran. What a fighter he was.
Yeah. Let's go back to what we were talking about for a second, the African-American experience in the United States, because I know what you're saying. You think race relations are perhaps worse today than they were even 20, 30 years ago, because we've created an underclass here in this country. We've created some people with no hope. Whose fault is that, and what can we do about it?
What I think is the society's fault, and it's the system's fault that would go. You must understand, Russ, that our country that was ratified in the Constitution, as I said, 3/5 compromise, 20 years on the slave question that could not be answered or even discussed until 1808. And only through the relentless and tenacious efforts of John Quincy Adams, he broke the filibuster to get the slave question back onto the House of the floor. There's been very significant cases for Black American and white America. That means one in the 1784, the 3/5 compromise. Then you had the 1850 fugitive slave law, you know, where they would even charge the marshal if he did not bring in a black, whether he was a slave or not. If you had an accuser that was white and you had a marshal, he had to follow that accuser no matter whether you were a free man or a bondsman. You had to go back into slavery and they would take away your rights. But then in 1857, they came up with the Dred Scott case. The Dred Scott case, one of the most celebrated cases of any African American in the history of our country, and Chief Justice Roger Bruce Cheney said that that a black man had no rights that a white man was bound to respect, and that we wasn't a part of the Constitution, we were articles of merchandise. So therefore we could be used like a horse, a cow, a pig. If we run off, we could have the right to go back and get us and put us back into bondage.
Now that has got to affect even present-day African Americans, the fact that they were treated that way. Is that
absolutely? See, but this is a gravitation of how this thing has been going, and these minds have been where it was like one of my greatest heroes is John Brown. John Brown said there's a color problem in this country. In 1859, 1858, he attacked Harper's Ferry.
They hanged him.
Yes, they hanged him, but even then they said he was a noble man. The governor that hanged him, and that Robert E. Lee was the one who captured it.
I know.
You know what I mean?
I know.
So they had to give him his thing because he was saying to them, when he was going into this wagon going up to be hung at the Blue Ridge Mountains, he said, what a beautiful country. This is a hero. White and black alike makes these things happen that make this country as great. So you can never look at it as me as a black American, look at you as a white American and say you're evil. No, some evil people may be white, but I can't paint with that general brush. Some blacks, you can't say some blacks may be wrong, but you can't paint with that kind of a brush. But you have to deal with it.
But many whites today say, okay, but that was 200, 400 years ago. I didn't do anything to the blacks. Why are they still mad at me?
Because of the legacy that was left by slavery for 344 years of slavery, and it was 244 years of slavery, 90 years of segregation. So then, 1896, they came up with Ferguson versus Plessy, separate but equal. We got a lot of separateness, no equalness, you know what I mean? So that only compounded and further put segregation, which was a sophisticated way of slavery.
Okay, so we got separateness, not equalness, right? Separateness. Right. Now, here we are, dissolved 40 years later. I fought for civil rights in the 1960s. I had friends. I knew I was in the Huff area of Cleveland. I went to the Malcolm X. I did 3 television shows with Malcolm X back in the 60s. We all wanted integration. Now we're here 30 years later, and there are blacks who are saying, we want our own colleges. We don't want to be, they want separation again.
Now, you know what I think? It's a confused state of mind here. And what they're thinking about in separation is that they want to have an identity because they think they're being swallowed up. But they can't. I'm a black man. There's nothing you can do to change that. And I'm an American, and nothing you can do to change that. So I want every jot and jittle of the Constitution. So now what they did, they got the Civil Rights Act passed in 1954, and it wasn't the teeth in it that it was, with all deliberate speed when they went to the school part of bringing the schools up. But you got to understand in America, you got to be able to work America and make America understand what it is. But this graduation of racism and segregation and prejudice has made a significant impact on black America. And they suffer from hopelessness, helplessness, and despair. I reject that. I refuse to accept that these things will happen without someone furthering them. I go out in spite of, not because of, to make this country live up to its creed, you know what I mean? And when you do this, you're going to make enemies. It's much more easier to die for America than it is to live for America.
Don, I agree with that. We have a phone call from Bill from New York. Bill, you're on the line.
Yes, is this me?
That's from Wyoming. I'm sorry.
Yes,
I didn't see the W. I thought it was an N. It's from Wyoming. Bill, you're on the line. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. I just think that, Don, you're selling out black America short. It seems to me that things were way worse way back when, and I'm 30 years old. I can only talk about what my dad went through, and he's a Hispanic American, and the blacks went through the same kind of stuff, where you couldn't go into a restaurant, you had to sit in the back of a bus, you couldn't use the same restroom as a white person. I don't think you're doing justice to the black people or to any minority now, saying that things are worse off now. Black people, Hispanic people, Asian people, we all have opportunity.
Okay.
We have equal opportunity.
We have to go to a break, so I'm going to give him 15 seconds to answer that.
Well, first of all, I think you misconstrued what I'm saying. When I say worse, when he said the conditions, we would time frame. If you're going to go back into slavery, there is no way that it could possibly be worse than it was then.
We'll finish it right after these.
And still undefeated, and still the world champion, Julio Cesar Chavez.
There you are again, Don. Tell me about this.
Well, Julio Cesar Chavez has been with me something like 12 years. He's a great fighter, a Mexican kid that couldn't speak English. In fact, Roger, he is fighting on September the 17th at the MGM Grand against Meldrick Taylor in a long-awaited rematch. And along with him as co-features, we got the welterweight champion of the world, Felix Trinidad, taking on Yuri Brad Campos, who is 56-0. Both of these fighters are undefeated. Then we have Jesse James Leja, who comes from San Antonio, Texas, and he is taking on Gabriel Ruelas in a mandatory fight for his super featherweight crown. And then to add on to that, we got Frankie Randall, the guy that beat Julio Cesar Chavez, fighting Juan Kaji for the junior welterweight crown, all on the same card.
Where is it and when is it?
September the 17th, the MGM Grand, so call your local cable operator and make sure you be able to get it because this is going to be a slam dunk.
Okay, very quick, because we've got short segment here. You said the word great fighter. You've looked at most of them. What makes a great fighter? Give me 3 or 4 words you look for.
A fighter that has the intensity to go out and win, and if something should happen, if you get knocked down, he never say die, such as Julio Cesar Chavez. Snatched victory out of the jaws of defeat, stopped the possible out of the impossible. 2 seconds left, he knocks out an opponent that was beating him, which was Meldrick Taylor.
Tyson, a great fighter or not a great fighter?
Intensity, great fighter, a guy who's captured the imagination of the people worldwide because he does what they want to see, knock out people, the explosive big punch, and he comes in with his direct mind focus on what he's doing, fighting. That's my job. That's what I got to do, and I do it better than anybody. So this is what is contagious to the populace.
How good a fighter will Tyson be when he gets out of prison?
Well, if there's any indication like Muhammad Ali, the legend himself, three-time heavyweight champion of the world, he would be great because Ali went into exile. He was out for 4 years. He came back in the latter part of his career. He just was great and surpassed the beginning of his career. So if Tyson has any indication of doing the same thing, or I think he's going to be fabulous.
Greatest fight I ever saw, Thriller in Manila. Okay. But I saw Ali that night. That's when I knew. I mean, I always loved Ali, but I couldn't believe he was taking the punches he was taking. I mean, it was clear to me he was hurt and hurt bad in that fight. Did you have that feeling?
Yes, I promoted that fight, and Ali said that was the closest he ever came to death in that fight when he fought Joe Frazier. He fought a fight that was incomparable. It was a classic, and it was, Joe Frazier's guy Eddie Foote stopped the fight in the 14th round.
Right.
And it was a thriller in Manila. It was a classic performance from two great athletes.
Did you know Ali was getting hurt out there?
No, I didn't. I thought it was just the blows that's being exchanged by guys. But Ali, he said when they interviewed him, he said it was the closest he ever came to death. That was a fight because these two guys had such a dislike for each other, and that added the passion, the desire, and the commitment to hurt each other when they was in there fighting. They had 3 fights. They were all classics.
You think that's the one that really caused Ali some permanent damage?
No, I don't think so. I think the one that caused Ali permanent damage was the one at Madison Square Garden when he fought a guy named Ernie Shavers, the hardest hitting guy in the business. I think that fight, in my opinion, was the fight that really hurt Ali as far as fighting goes. I think this guy, at that particular time, Ali shouldn't have fought this man, and he was a devastating puncher, and I think that's where the damage would begin, if any.
Smartest fighter you ever worked with, who was it?
Muhammad Ali, 3-time heavyweight champion. I coined the phrase for him, every knee must bend, every head must bow, every tongue must confess thou art the greatest of all times.
He really is, isn't he?
He was a genius. He was a genius, and he knew how to appeal to people, and he would do it with white and black alike. This is a tremendous asset, and this is what I say to my black brothers and white brothers. One of the great musicians of our time was George Gershwin. Right. And he played timeless music, but he couldn't have did it without the black keys. Black and white working together gave us timeless music with Bach, Beethoven, Brahms, Tchaikovsky, Mozart. All of those are timeless efforts, but they were done integrated. They were done working together. Working together works. This is the greatest country in the world, bar none. Certainly we have our injustices, we have our iniquities, but we must find ways and means to resolve them to make America better. Don't sit by on the stoop and keep condemning and criticizing if you don't have no alternative. And what we're happening to our youth is the apathy, the loss of hope. We must give them back hope and give them an alternative. Without that, you can't continue to tell them they should do this, that, or the other, and you leave them starving without anything to do. Don't give them no hope, aspiration to do anything better, and yet you say, we should do this here. You break our legs and tell us how come we're limping. You mean you shut us off from the schools and say, how come we're so dumb? You got to be able to help. You got to be able to respect and understand taking the 2x4 out of our eye before you take the splinter out of your brother's eye.
Okay, we got another caller here, Tyler. Tyler, you're on the line.
How you doing?
Good. How you doing? You have a question?
Not too bad. Not too bad. Everything's burning up here in Montana. I got all these fires. But anyway, Don, I love the hair. And a couple questions here.
Hi, Tyler. Thank you so much for the compliment, Tyler.
Okay. Todd Kid Foster, he's a great boxer. He's on the Olympic team. He's from Great Falls, Montana. What do you think about this guy? Is he ever going to have a shot?
Well, I haven't had a chance. I really don't know about him because whoever's promoting him, and they haven't put him out into the light. But when you said Montana, I thought about George Armstrong Custer, in his last stand in 1875, June 25th, when unity, solidarity, and togetherness came into play. The Arapaho, the Sioux, and the Cheyenne, Sitting Bull, brought all those tribes together. They were all minorities, and they never could have beat George Armstrong one-on-one. But he said, we must come together and put aside our differences and come together. This is a message to the black man.
That was not an
and he put them together. It wasn't a good example, but it showed what unity can do.
It was not a good day for George.
It wasn't a good day for George.
No, it was a bad day for George.
1875.
If George could have just got those guys to come over the hill one at a time, though, he could have picked them up.
That's right.
He just couldn't do it. There were just too damn many.
Roger, I'm telling you, buddies, that lesson shows you if we stop the internecine warfare, yep, and we start trying to find ways and means of helping, rather than always criticizing and condemning, we could do so much with this nation. This is a great nation. I love America.
Okay, Don, come back and see me.
Roger, I will.
Okay, we'll be right back.